The blood on his white shirt was spreading faster than the rain could wash it away. Emma's hands trembled as she held the door open, her cottage illuminated by lightning that revealed a stranger's face, beautiful despite the pain etched across it, dangerous despite his obvious vulnerability. She had 30 seconds to decide: close the door on the bleeding man collapsing on her porch, or let him in and change her life forever. The storm screamed around them. He looked up at her with eyes that held secrets darker than the night itself. "Please," he whispered, and the word carried the weight of a man who never begged. She stepped aside. The October storm had been building all day, dark clouds gathering over the coastal town of Ravensport like an ominous promise. Emma Clarke had watched from her cottage window as the sky turned from grey to nearly black, the wind bending the pine trees that separated her small property from the main road. She'd lived here for 3 years now, seeking the solitude that came with being the last house before the cliffs and the churning Atlantic Ocean beyond. At 28, Emma had built a quiet life for herself after leaving Boston and a failed engagement that still sometimes haunted her dreams. She worked remotely as a freelance editor, her clients never seeing the paint-stained jeans and oversized sweaters that comprised her daily uniform, never knowing that she took their manuscript calls while watching the ocean through rain-streaked windows. Tonight, she'd prepared for the storm the way she always did, candles lined up on the kitchen counter in case the power failed, extra firewood stacked by the hearth, her laptop charged, and a pot of vegetable soup simmering on the stove. The weather reports had called for severe conditions, but Emma had weathered worse storms in this cottage, finding strange comfort in nature's fury while she remained warm and safe inside. She was adding more pepper to the soup when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A crash, different from thunder, metal against wood. Then silence, heavy and somehow more ominous than the howling wind. Emma's first instinct was to ignore it. Living alone on the edge of nowhere had taught her that not every unusual sound required investigation. But something pulled at her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. She set down her wooden spoon and moved toward the front window, pushing aside the cream-colored curtain she'd hung last spring. The porch light illuminated little in the driving rain, but she could make out a shape near her property entrance. A dark vehicle, expensive-looking even in the storm, its front end crumpled against the large oak tree that marked the beginning of her driveway. Steam or smoke, she couldn't tell which, rose from the hood, quickly dissipated by the wind. Her heart rate picked up. Someone was hurt. Someone needed help. But Emma had learned caution in her years of solitude. She grabbed her phone first, pulling up the emergency dial screen but not yet pressing call. Then she reached for the baseball bat she kept by the door, a remnant of her brother's college days that she'd never returned. Armed with both modern and primitive protection, she opened the door. The wind immediately tried to rip it from her hands. Rain lashed at her face, cold and stinging. She squinted through the darkness toward the crashed vehicle, her wool sweater already soaking through. "Hello," she called out, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Is anyone there? Are you hurt?" For a long moment, there was no response. Then she saw movement, a figure emerging from the driver's side, tall and moving with obvious difficulty. Lightning flashed, and in that brief moment of illumination, Emma saw him clearly. He was maybe in his early 30s, dark hair plastered to his head by rain, wearing what looked like an expensive suit now ruined by weather and blood. So much blood. His white shirt was stained crimson on the left side, the color stark even in the dim light. He took one step toward her cottage, then another, his hand pressed against his ribs. "Help," he managed, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Please, help." Emma's nursing instincts, dormant since she'd left that career path 5 years ago, kicked in immediately. She could see he was going into shock, his face too pale, his movements becoming uncoordinated. Whatever had happened to him, he needed immediate medical attention. "Can you walk?" she called out, already moving down the porch steps toward him. He nodded, but his next step proved it was a lie. His knees buckled, and Emma rushed forward, somehow catching him before he hit the muddy ground. He was heavy, solid muscle beneath the soaked clothing, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. "I've got you," she said, adjusting her grip around his waist, feeling the warm wetness of blood against her hand. Just a few more steps. Come on. He leaned heavily on her, and together they stumbled toward the cottage. Up the porch steps, each one feeling like a mountain. Through the door that she'd left open, wind and rain following them inside. She kicked it shut behind them, the sudden silence almost as shocking as the storm had been loud. In the warm light of her living room, Emma got her first real look at him. Even injured and soaked, there was something arresting about his face, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes that were an unusual shade of grey-green, like the ocean on a stormy day. There was a hardness to his features, a sense of controlled danger that made her heart skip for reasons that had nothing to do with medical emergency. "Bathroom or living room?" she asked, practical instincts overriding her instinctive wariness. "I need to see that wound." "Living room," he managed, his voice rough with pain. "Don't want to mess up your bathroom." Despite everything, Emma almost smiled at his concern for her decor. "The couch," she directed, helping him navigate around her coffee table. He collapsed onto the worn leather sofa with a grunt of pain, his hand still pressed to his side. Emma's mind raced through the medical training she'd abandoned years ago. Gunshot wound, it had to be, given the location and the amount of blood. Entry wound only from what she could see, which meant the bullet was still inside. He needed a hospital, needed surgery, needed antibiotics and proper care. But even as she thought it, she knew what his answer would be when she suggested it. "I need to call 911, she said, reaching for her phone. His hand shot out, faster than she would have thought possible given his condition, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. "No," he said, and there was steel beneath the pain in his voice. "No hospitals. No police." Emma's blood ran cold. This was the moment, she realized, when she should have felt fear. This bleeding stranger who'd crashed outside her home, who refused medical help, who looked at her with eyes that held dangerous secrets. This was when she should have run, should have called for help anyway, should have protected herself. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why not?" He held her gaze for a long moment, and she saw the calculation behind his eyes. How much to tell her, how much to risk. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. "Because the people who did this will be looking for me in hospitals," he said quietly. "And if they find me, they'll kill me. And probably anyone who helped me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma knew she should be terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm, as if some part of her had been expecting this moment, this choice, this stranger who'd brought danger to her doorstep. "Are you going to hurt me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He seemed surprised by the question. "No," he said simply. "I give you my word." "The word of a man running from killers isn't worth much," she pointed out. For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Fair point. But it's all I have to offer right now." Emma studied him, really looked at him. Beneath the blood and pain, she saw exhaustion, determination, and something else. Loneliness, perhaps. Or resignation. The look of a man who'd been running for a long time and was tired of it. She made her decision. "I used to be a nurse," she said, setting down her phone but keeping it close. "I can try to help you, but I need to see the wound. And you need to tell me your name." He hesitated, then seemed to decide that much wasn't a risk. "Alessandro," he said. "My name is Alessandro." "Emma," she replied. "Now let's see how bad this is." She helped him remove his jacket and the ruined shirt beneath, trying to maintain professional detachment as she exposed his torso. But it was impossible not to notice the lean muscle, the scattered scars that spoke of a violent life, the dark tattoo that curved over his left shoulder, an intricate design she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. The wound was high on his left side, just below his rib cage. The bullet had entered at an angle, which was both good and bad. Good because it had likely missed major organs, bad because it made extraction more complicated. Blood still oozed from the hole, but it wasn't the spurting arterial bleeding that would have meant immediate death without intervention. "You're lucky," she said, reaching for her first aid kit from the bathroom cabinet. "Another inch to the right and you'd have bled out before you made it to my door." "Story of my life," Alessandro muttered, then hissed in pain as she began cleaning the wound with antiseptic. "Lucky." Emma worked in focused silence, falling back into medical procedures she'd once known by heart. The bullet needed to come out, but she wasn't equipped for surgery here. The best she could do was clean the wound, pack it, and hope infection didn't set in before. Before what? Before he left. Before the people hunting him found them both? "This is going to hurt," she warned, preparing to probe for the bullet with sterilized tweezers. Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Do it." She worked as quickly as she dared, her hands surprisingly steady despite the surreal nature of the situation. The bullet was lodged against a rib. She could feel the resistance when her tweezers touched metal. Alessandro made no sound, but she felt his entire body go rigid with pain, his hand gripping the couch cushion so hard his knuckles turned white. "Almost there," she murmured, more to herself than to him. One more attempt, a different angle, and suddenly the bullet came free with a soft click against the metal tweezers. She held it up, a small, deadly piece of metal that had come so close to ending this stranger's life. "Got it," she said, dropping the bullet into a small dish. "Now I need to pack and bandage the wound. You'll need antibiotics, and you really should have stitches, but butterfly bandages will have to do for now." Alessandro was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes remained alert, watching her every movement. "You're good at this," he observed. "I used to be," Emma replied, applying antibiotic ointment with gentle efficiency. "Before I decided I couldn't handle the emotional weight of it anymore. Funny how skills come back when you need them." "Thank you," Alessandro said quietly. "For helping me. For not calling the police. For..." He paused, searching for words. "For not being afraid." Emma met his eyes as she pressed gauze against the wound, her hand steady against his skin. "Who says I'm not afraid?" "You are," he acknowledged. "But you're helping anyway. That's rare." She taped the gauze in place, then sat back, suddenly aware of how close they were, how intimate this whole situation had become. A stranger on her couch, his blood on her hands, the storm still raging outside, and a connection forming between them that she didn't understand but couldn't deny. "You should rest," she said, standing up and putting professional distance between them. "I'll get you some water and something for the pain. In the morning, you need to tell me who you really are and why someone wants you dead." Alessandro nodded, his eyelids already drooping with exhaustion and blood loss. "In the morning," he agreed. "But Emma..." She turned back at the doorway. "Yes. I meant what I said. I won't hurt you. Whatever happens, whatever you find out about me, I promise you that." Emma looked at him, this dangerous, mysterious stranger who'd crashed into her solitary life on a storm-swept night, and felt something shift inside her chest. A door opening that she'd thought she'd locked forever. "We'll see," she said softly, and went to get the water. Behind her, Alessandro closed his eyes, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, felt something that might have been safe. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Emma's cottage, something unexpected had begun. Something that would change everything. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in the armchair across from the couch where Alessandro had finally drifted into uneasy rest, watching his chest rise and fall, monitoring his color for signs of fever or shock, and wondering what madness had possessed her to let a bleeding stranger into her home. The storm had gradually subsided around 3 in the morning, the violent winds giving way to steady rain, then finally to silence broken only by the drip of water from the eaves and Alessandro's occasional restless movements. Emma had changed out of her blood-stained clothes into dry jeans and a thick cardigan, but she hadn't moved from her vigil. In the grey light of dawn, she studied him more carefully. His face, relaxed in sleep, had lost some of its hard edges. He looked younger, more vulnerable, though the stubble darkening his jaw and the small scar above his right eyebrow spoke of a life lived on the edge. The tattoo she'd noticed earlier was now partially visible where the blanket had slipped, what looked like a family crest of some kind, intricate and clearly expensive work. Who was he really? And more importantly, what kind of trouble had she invited into her carefully constructed sanctuary? Alessandro stirred as the morning light strengthened, his eyes opening slowly. For a moment, he seemed disoriented, his hand automatically moving to his bandaged side. Then his gaze found her in the chair, and something like relief crossed his features. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough with sleep and lingering pain. "Someone needed to make sure you didn't die in the night," Emma replied, trying to sound more casual than she felt. "How do you feel?" He shifted carefully, testing his injury. "Like I got shot, but alive. Better than the alternative." He sat up slowly, grimacing. "Thank you." Again. Emma stood and moved to the window, needing the distance. Outside, her property looked like a war zone. Broken branches scattered across the lawn, Alessandro's car still wrapped around her oak tree, mud everywhere. Evidence of last night's violence made stark in the morning light. "That car needs to be dealt with," she said. "Someone will see it eventually. We're isolated here, but not that isolated." "I know." Alessandro swung his legs off the couch, moving with obvious discomfort. "I'll take care of it. But first." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I owe you explanations." "You owe me more than that." Emma turned to face him. "You owe me the truth about why someone shot you and who might come looking for you here. Because if I'm in danger because I helped you, I need to know." Alessandro met her gaze directly. "You're right. You deserve the truth." He took a breath. "My full name is Alessandro Russo. And I was the head of the Russo crime family in Boston." Emma's heart sank even though some part of her had suspected something along these lines. "Mafia," she said flatly. "That's the common term," he acknowledged. "Though we prefer to think of ourselves as businessmen with unconventional methods." "Don't." Emma's voice was sharp. "Don't sanitize it. You're telling me you're a criminal." "Yes," Alessandro said simply, not trying to defend himself. "I am. Or was. It's complicated." "Complicated," Emma repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. "I shelter someone from a storm, and it turns out he's a mafia boss. Do you know how insane this is?" "I do." Alessandro stood slowly, holding his side. "And I understand if you want me gone right now. I can try to manage on my own. But please, let me explain first." Emma crossed her arms, defensive and angry, and somehow still unable to turn him out. "Explain then. You have 5 minutes." Alessandro moved to the window, careful of his injury, looking out at the damaged landscape. 3 months ago, my father died. He was the don, the boss, of our family. The expectation was that I would take his place, continue the business as it had always been run. He paused. "But I didn't want that life anymore." "Hard to believe, given your current situation," Emma said dryly. He glanced back at her, a humorless smile touching his lips. "Fair. But it's true. I've been trying to transition the family businesses into legitimate enterprises. Selling off the illegal operations, investing in legal ventures, getting us out of the violence." His hand touched his bandaged side unconsciously. "Not everyone in the organization was happy about that." "So someone tried to kill you?" "My uncle, specifically. Marco Russo. He saw my father's death as an opportunity to take control and expand our criminal operations, not shut them down. When I refused, when I started actively dismantling the parts of the business he controlled." Alessandro's jaw tightened. He decided I was a liability. Emma processed this, her mind racing. "So you ran." "I've been trying to gather evidence against him, documents that prove his illegal activities. Things I could use to ensure my family's safety while I complete the transition to legitimate business. He turned back to face her fully. Last night, I thought I'd finally gotten what I needed from one of our accountants. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Marco's men were waiting. How did you escape? Barely. Alessandro's expression darkened with the memory. There were 3 of them. I managed to get to my car, but not before one of them got off a shot. I drove without knowing where I was going, just trying to put distance between us. Then the storm hit, visibility went to nothing, and... He gestured vaguely. Your oak tree stopped me. And led you to my door, Emma finished. And led me to you, Alessandro agreed quietly. The luckiest accident of my life. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of these revelations hanging between them. Emma knew she should be ordering him out, calling the police, protecting herself from whatever danger came with harboring a mafia boss, reformed or not. Instead, she found herself asking, are they looking for you? Definitely. Marco can't afford to let me live, not with what I know. Alessandro's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than his potential murder. But the storm will have covered my tracks. They'll have a hard time finding me here, at least for a while. How long is a while? Days, maybe. A week if we're lucky. He met her eyes. Which is why I need to leave soon. I won't bring that danger to your door any longer than necessary. Emma moved to the couch, sinking down onto it, suddenly exhausted. This is insane, she muttered. 2 days ago, my biggest problem was a tight deadline on a manuscript. Now I'm hiding a mafia boss from his murderous uncle. Alessandro surprised her by sitting down in the chair she'd occupied all night, moving with obvious care for his injury. I know. And I'm sorry. If I had any other option. He trailed off. But I don't. Not yet. I need a few days to recover enough to travel safely, to reach people I trust who can help me. People you trust, Emma repeated. Do those exist in your world? Surprisingly, yes. A few. He leaned his head back against the chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. My lawyer, my oldest friend who got out of the family business years ago, and... He hesitated. My younger sister. She never wanted any part of this life. I've been trying to make sure she stays free of it. The mention of his sister softened something in Emma. How old is she? 24. Rosa. Alessandro's expression became almost tender. She's studying to be a doctor. Everything I'm doing, all of this, is partially for her. To give her a life without this shadow over it. Emma studied him. This complicated, dangerous man who'd invaded her peaceful existence. A criminal, yes. But also someone trying to change, trying to protect his family, trying to escape a life he no longer wanted. She understood that desire to escape more than she wanted to admit. What do you need? She heard herself ask. To recover, to contact your people, to whatever comes next. Alessandro looked at her with something like wonder. You're not throwing me out. I should be, Emma said. This is probably the stupidest decision I've ever made, and trust me, I've made some spectacular bad decisions. She sighed. But you're injured, you're being hunted, and despite everything, I believe you when you say you won't hurt me. I won't, Alessandro said with quiet intensity. On my sister's life, I swear I won't. Okay then. Emma stood, suddenly needing activity to process this insane situation. First, you need food and more rest. Then we need to deal with that car. And you need to contact these people you trust without revealing where you are. She paused at the kitchen doorway. I still think this is crazy. It is, Alessandro agreed. But thank you. For the chance. As Emma moved into her kitchen to prepare breakfast, she caught her reflection in the window glass, a woman who'd run from her old life seeking safety and solitude, now harboring a dangerous fugitive and feeling more alive than she had in years. Behind her, Alessandro closed his eyes, the tension slowly leaving his shoulders. For the first time since his father's death, since the violence had escalated, since his world had tilted into chaos, he felt something fragile taking root. Hope. Outside, the morning continued to brighten, revealing a world washed clean by the storm but forever changed by what the night had brought. For both of them, there would be no going back to what they'd been before. Only forward, into whatever came next. The next 3 days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Emma would wake early, check Alessandro's wound for infection, none, thankfully, prepare breakfast while he slept, and then settle into her work editing manuscripts while he made quiet phone calls from her porch, speaking in Italian to people whose names she didn't ask. They existed in her small cottage like two planets orbiting carefully around each other, close but not touching, aware but not intruding. It was strange. It shouldn't have worked. But somehow it did. On the second morning, Emma woke to find Alessandro already up, sitting at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking stronger though still moving carefully. The swelling around his wound had gone down, the angry red fading to a less alarming pink. Good signs that his body was healing. "You look better," she observed, pouring herself coffee from the pot he'd made. "I feel almost human," he replied. "Your medical skills are impressive." "I just cleaned and bandaged. Your body did the actual healing." Emma sat across from him, cradling her mug. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching dust motes and painting everything gold. It felt almost normal, sitting here having coffee with him. Which was perhaps the strangest thing of all. "I need to ask you something," Alessandro said, his tone careful. "And you're free to say no." Emma raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "It's about my sister, Rosa." He ran a hand through his hair, no longer slicked back with rain and blood but falling softly across his forehead. "I haven't been able to reach her. Her phone goes straight to voicemail, and she's not responding to our emergency signals." Emma felt a chill. "You think something's happened to her?" "I don't know. Marco wouldn't." Alessandro stopped, his jaw tight. "I want to believe he wouldn't hurt her. She's family, she's not involved in any of this. But I thought he wouldn't try to kill me either." "What do you need?" "I need someone to check on her. Someone Marco's people wouldn't recognize." Alessandro met her eyes. "I know it's asking too much. You've already done more than anyone could expect. Where is she?" Emma interrupted. Alessandro blinked. "You'll do it." "I didn't say that yet." "Where is she?" "Boston. She has an apartment in Back Bay, near her university." He pulled out his phone, a burner, Emma had noticed, not his regular device. "I can give you the address, what she looks like. You could just check on her? Make sure she's okay." Emma should have said no. Should have drawn the line at harboring him, not extending into active participation in his dangerous world. But she thought about a 24-year-old girl, trying to build a normal life, whose only crime was having the wrong family. "I can go tomorrow," Emma heard herself say. "I have a meeting with a client in Boston anyway. I can make a detour." The relief on Alessandro's face was profound. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "I have some idea," Emma said dryly. "It means I'm officially involved in whatever this is, not just an innocent bystander anymore." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just..." Emma paused, choosing her words. "Tell me about her. Your sister. If I'm going to check on her, I should know who I'm looking for beyond just a photograph." Alessandro's expression softened immediately. "Rosa is. She's the best of us. Of our family, I mean. Smart, compassionate, determined. She looks like our mother, dark hair, green eyes, too thin because she forgets to eat when she's studying." He pulled up a photo on his phone and handed it to Emma. The young woman in the picture was beautiful in an understated way. Intelligent eyes, a warm smile, wearing doctor's scrubs and looking tired but happy. She wants to specialize in pediatric oncology, Alessandro continued. She spent summers in high school volunteering at children's hospitals. Our father never understood her, but he was proud in his own way. His voice turned sad. She didn't come to his funeral. Said she couldn't be part of that world, even to say goodbye. That must have hurt, Emma said gently. It did. But I understood. She made a choice to be separate from our life, and I respect that. Alessandro took his phone back, looking at his sister's picture. I've been sending her money for school, for her apartment. She doesn't know where it comes from. It's filtered through several accounts. I wanted her to have that freedom without feeling obligated to me. Emma saw a different side of him in that moment. Not the dangerous mafia boss, but a brother who loved his sister enough to let her go, to protect her even from knowing she was being protected. I'll find her, Emma promised. And I'll make sure she's safe. The conversation shifted to practicalities, Rosa's address, her schedule, how Emma should approach her if she was home. But underneath the practical discussion, something else was happening. A trust forming, a connection deepening between two people who shouldn't have met, who came from completely different worlds. That afternoon, while Alessandro rested, Emma dealt with the car situation. She called a tow truck service, claiming her boyfriend had crashed during the storm and she needed it removed discreetly. The driver who came was taciturn and asked no questions, especially after Emma slipped him an extra $100 in cash. Boyfriend's gonna get an earful, the driver muttered, hooking up the damaged vehicle. Oh, he already got one, Emma assured him, and it wasn't even entirely a lie. When Alessandro woke from his nap, the car was gone, the damaged oak tree was the only evidence of the crash, and Emma was back at her laptop, editing a thriller manuscript that seemed absurdly tame compared to her current reality. The car? Alessandro asked, appearing in the doorway of her small office. Gone. 100 miles away at a salvage yard, according to the driver. They'll strip it for parts. By next week, there won't be anything left to trace. Emma looked up from her screen. I may be new to harboring fugitives, but I'm a quick learner. Alessandro laughed. The first time she'd heard the sound. It transformed his face, erasing years and making him look almost boyish. Remind me never to underestimate you. I intend to remind you frequently, Emma said, but she was smiling. That evening, they shared dinner pasta that Alessandro insisted on cooking despite Emma's protests about his injury. He moved around her small kitchen with surprising grace, finding spices and tools without asking where things were, as if he'd been cooking here for years. You're good at this, Emma observed, watching him chop garlic with professional efficiency. My grandmother insisted all her grandchildren learn to cook. Said a person who couldn't feed themselves was helpless in the most fundamental way. Alessandro added the garlic to olive oil, the sizzle and smell filling the kitchen. Some of my best memories are in her kitchen, learning to make pasta from scratch. Tell me about her, Emma said, settling onto a kitchen stool. And he did. As he cooked, Alessandro talked about his grandmother Rosa, his sister's namesake, who'd emigrated from Sicily as a young bride, who'd built a life in a new country while maintaining the traditions of the old. He talked about Sunday dinners with extended family, about learning Italian through cooking lessons, about the way his grandmother could silence a room of arguing men with just a look. Emma found herself sharing too, about her own grandmother in Maine, about summers spent in a cottage not unlike this one, about learning to edit by fixing grammar in her grandmother's mystery novels. She was a writer? Alessandro asked, stirring sauce. Amateur but prolific. She never published anything, but she loved creating stories. I think that's where I got my love of books. Emma smiled at the memory. She died when I was in nursing school. Left me her entire collection of manuscripts. I still have them. Why did you leave nursing? Alessandro asked carefully, as if sensing this was delicate territory. Emma was quiet for a moment. Burnout, mostly. The emotional toll of watching people suffer, not being able to save everyone. There was one patient. She stopped, surprised at how much she wanted to tell him. A little girl, 7 years old. Leukemia. We fought so hard to save her, and we did, for a while. She went into remission. But then it came back, aggressive and fast. Alessandro turned from the stove, giving her his full attention. Her last days, I was her primary nurse. And she was so brave, so sweet, telling her parents it was okay, that she wasn't scared. But I could see she was terrified. And I couldn't do anything. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I held her hand when she died. And afterward, I went home and couldn't stop crying for 3 days. That's when you left. Not immediately. I tried to push through for another year. But I couldn't. I couldn't open myself up like that anymore. Couldn't care that much and keep functioning when caring wasn't enough. Emma wiped at her eyes, embarrassed by the tears. So I ran. Bought this cottage. Became an editor. Surrounded myself with fictional problems that could always be solved with a red pen. Alessandro left the stove and came to her, moving slowly because of his injury but with clear purpose. He stood in front of her, close enough that she could smell the cooking spices and something underneath that was just him. You didn't run, he said quietly. You survived. There's a difference. Emma looked up at him, at this dangerous man with gentle eyes who somehow understood. Is that what you're doing? Surviving. Trying to, Alessandro admitted. And failing most days. Until the storm brought me to your door. They stood like that for a long moment, something electric and fragile between them. Then the pasta timer beeped, breaking the spell, and Alessandro returned to the stove with a slight smile. They ate dinner at a small table, talking about books and movies and favorite cities, carefully avoiding the dangerous realities waiting outside her cottage walls. For a few hours, they weren't a mafia boss and his accidental savior. They were just Alessandro and Emma, two people sharing a meal and discovering they liked each other's company. After dinner, Alessandro insisted on doing the dishes despite Emma's protests. She watched him work, this man who commanded criminal empires now carefully drying her mismatched plates, and felt something shift in her chest. Later, when they'd both settled into the living room, Emma with her book, Alessandro making quiet phone calls in Italian, she found herself watching him instead of reading. He sat by the window, moonlight painting his profile, speaking in low tones to someone about accounts and transfers and safe houses. He must have felt her gaze because he looked over, their eyes meeting across the room. He smiled, just a small curve of his lips, but it made Emma's heart do something complicated. This was dangerous, she realized. Not because he was dangerous, though he was, but because she was starting to care about what happened to him. Starting to want him to stay. And that terrified her more than any threat from his uncle ever could. Emma left for Boston before dawn, wanting to reach the city while traffic was still manageable. Alessandro had been awake to see her off, his concern evident despite his attempts to hide it behind practical advice and careful instructions. Rose's apartment is on Marlborough Street, he'd reminded her for the 3rd time, pressing a piece of paper into her hand with the address written in his neat, precise handwriting. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. If she's not home, there's a coffee shop she likes called Dante's 2 blocks away. She goes there most mornings around 9. I remember, Emma assured him, adjusting her scarf against the morning chill. I'll find her, check that she's okay, and come straight back. Don't tell her about me. Don't tell her where I am. Alessandro's hands had moved to her shoulders, his grip gentle but intense. If Marco's people have gotten to her, if they're watching her, I can't risk them following you back here. Emma had nodded, very aware of how close he was standing, how his hands felt warm through her jacket, how his eyes held more than just concern for his sister. I'll be careful. I promise. Emma. He'd said her name like a prayer. Thank you. For everything. She'd wanted to say something meaningful in return, but the words had tangled in her throat. Instead, she'd simply smiled and walked to her car, feeling his gaze on her back until she'd turned onto the main road. Now, 3 hours later, Emma navigated through Boston's familiar streets with a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. She'd lived here for 6 years, first in nursing school, then working at Massachusetts General, then sharing an apartment in Cambridge with her ex-fiancé David. The city held as many painful memories as good ones. She found parking near Rose's apartment building, a beautiful brownstone in one of Back Bay's quieter streets. The kind of building that suggested money but not ostentation. Alessandro had chosen well for his sister, giving her a life that looked normal, safe, far removed from his own dangerous world. Emma stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching the building. No obvious surveillance, no suspicious cars, no men in dark suits trying too hard to blend in. But what did she know about spotting mafia surveillance? This was so far outside her realm of experience it was absurd. Taking a deep breath, she approached the building and pressed the buzzer for 3B. Nothing. She tried again, holding the button longer. Still nothing. She's not home. The voice came from behind her, making Emma jump. She turned to find an elderly woman with a small dog, keys in hand, looking at her with friendly curiosity. Rosa left early this morning. Saw her going out around 6:30 with her backpack. Probably headed to the hospital. Emma relaxed slightly. Hospital meant school, routine, normalcy. Do you know which hospital? Mass General usually, I think. She's doing her residency there. The woman opened the building door, the small dog pulling at its leash. Are you a friend of hers? Sort of, Emma improvised. Actually, I'm a friend of her brother's. Alessandro asked me to check on her while I was in town. The woman's expression shifted subtly, not quite fear, but a careful neutrality that told Emma this woman knew exactly what family Rosa came from. Alessandro. Of course. Well, Rosa seemed fine this morning. Rushed, like always, but fine. Thank you, Emma said warmly, trying to project trustworthiness. I'll try to catch her at the hospital. Mass General brought back memories Emma had tried to bury. She'd walked these halls countless times during her nursing school rotations, later as a licensed nurse. The antiseptic smell, the hushed urgency, the weight of human suffering contained within sterile walls. It all came rushing back as she entered the main building. She found the pediatric oncology department on the 5th floor. The walls were painted in cheerful colors, decorated with children's artwork and positive affirmations. Emma remembered this about children's wards, the determined effort to make horror seem manageable through bright paint and Disney characters. The nurses' station was staffed by 2 women, both younger than Emma, both looking tired in the way that told her they'd just finished a night shift. I'm looking for Rosa Russo, Emma said, approaching with what she hoped was a confident smile. I'm a friend. Is she working today? One of the nurses looked up, recognition in her eyes. Rosa? Yeah, she's here. Room 512, I think. But she's with a patient right now. That's okay. I can wait. Emma settled into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs that populated all hospitals, preparing to be patient. She didn't have to wait long. After about 15 minutes, a young woman emerged from room 512, and Emma recognized her immediately from Alessandro's photograph. Rosa Russo in person was even more striking than in pictures. Dark wavy hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, intelligent green eyes that looked exhausted, delicate features that suggested her brother's bone structure refined into something more feminine. She was also clearly stressed. Emma could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her shoulders hunched slightly forward, the quick, nervous glance she gave down the hallway before heading toward the nurse's station. Emma stood, intercepting her path gently. Rosa. The young woman stopped, wariness immediately evident. Yes. Do I know you? No, we've never met. My name is Emma Clarke. Your brother asked me to check on you. Rosa's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her face paled, and she grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her quickly into an empty consultation room and shutting the door. Which brother? Alessandro. Rosa's legs seemed to give out, and she sank into one of the chairs, her head in her hands. Oh God. He's alive. They said. I heard rumors he was dead. Emma sat across from her, keeping her voice calm and low. He's alive. He was hurt, but he's okay now. He's been trying to reach you. I had to get a new phone. They took my old one. Rosa looked up, and Emma saw tears in her eyes. 3 days ago, 2 of Uncle Marco's men came to my apartment. They were looking for Alessandro, asking if I'd heard from him, if I knew where he'd gone. They went through everything. My computer, my papers, my phone. They copied all my contacts, all my messages. Emma felt cold. Did they hurt you? No. But they made it very clear that if Alessandro contacted me, I needed to tell them immediately. For his own good, they said. For the family's protection. Rosa's voice was bitter. As if I'd believe anything Uncle Marco says. So you haven't heard from Alessandro at all? Nothing. I've been terrified, not knowing if he was alive or dead, if Uncle Marco succeeded in. Rosa stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Where is he? Is he safe? Emma hesitated. Alessandro's instructions had been clear. Don't tell Rosa where he was. But looking at this scared young woman who was clearly worried sick about her brother, keeping secrets felt cruel. He's safe, Emma said carefully. He's somewhere they can't find him, recovering from his injury. He wanted me to make sure you were okay, that Marco hadn't hurt you. I'm not the one who needs protection, Rosa said. Alessandro is the one with a target on his back. Uncle Marco won't stop until he's dead. He's already told the family that Alessandro betrayed them, that he's working with the FBI. Is he? No. Alessandro would never. Rosa's defense of her brother was immediate and fierce. He's trying to get us all out, to legitimize the businesses so we can have normal lives. But Uncle Marco sees it as weakness, as betrayal of our father's legacy. Your brother mentioned you chose to stay separate from the family business, Emma said gently. Rosa nodded, wiping at her eyes. When I was 18, I told Alessandro I wanted out. Wanted a normal life, a legitimate career, no connection to any of it. He helped me. Paid for school through untraceable accounts, set me up with this apartment, made sure I could build a life away from all of it. Her voice cracked. And now that life is contaminated anyway. Because I'm a Russo, and in our family, there's no such thing as truly getting out. Emma understood that feeling, being unable to escape your past, having it follow you no matter how far you ran. She tried to escape her old life in this very city, and look where it had gotten her, harboring her nursing school's mafia patient in her cottage. What will you do? Emma asked. Rosa straightened, visibly pulling herself together with an effort. What I've been doing. Go to work, take care of my patients, pretend everything's normal. What else can I do? She looked at Emma with her brother's intensity. But you need to tell Alessandro something for me. I will. Tell him that Uncle Marco is escalating. He's not just after Alessandro anymore. He's consolidating power, forcing everyone in the family to choose sides. The ones who support Alessandro's plan are being pushed out or worse. There was a... Rosa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Antonio De Luca. He was father's accountant, loyal to Alessandro. They found his body in the harbor 2 days ago. Emma's blood ran cold. Oh God. Marco is eliminating anyone who might help Alessandro or who knows too much about his operations. And he's getting bolder. Rosa's hands trembled as she spoke. Tell Alessandro he can't come back to Boston. Can't even think about it. It's a death trap now. I'll tell him. And tell him. Rosa's eyes filled with tears again. Tell him I love him. That I'm proud of what he's trying to do. And that I wish our father had lived to see him become the man he is now instead of the man our father wanted him to be. Emma felt her own throat tighten. I'll tell him. All of it. They talked for a few more minutes, Rosa giving Emma a new phone number, Emma providing vague reassurances without specifics. Then Rosa had to return to her patients, and Emma left the hospital with a heavy heart and information that would devastate the man waiting for her in her cottage. The drive back to Ravensport felt longer than the journey there. Emma's mind raced with everything Rosa had told her, with the weight of the message she carried. Antonio De Luca dead. Marco consolidating power. Rosa being watched and threatened. Alessandro's attempts to save his family, to get them out of the criminal life, were failing. And people were dying because of it. It was early evening when Emma finally pulled into her driveway. The cottage lights were on, warm and welcoming against the gathering dark. Alessandro appeared in the doorway before she'd even turned off the engine, his expression anxious and hopeful. Well, he asked as she climbed the porch steps. Is she okay? Emma took his hands, feeling how cold hers were despite the car's heater. She's physically fine. But we need to talk. Alessandro's face fell. Come inside. Tell me everything. Over tea that neither of them drank, Emma relayed everything. Rosa's fear, Marco's men searching her apartment, the new phone, and finally, the news about Antonio De Luca. Alessandro's reaction was controlled. Too controlled. He sat very still, his jaw tight, his hands clenched around his mug. Antonio, he said quietly. He had a wife. 2 daughters in college. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. He was helping me. Gathering evidence about Marco's operations. He must have gotten caught, and Marco. Alessandro set down his mug carefully, as if afraid what he might do if he moved too quickly. This is my fault. I asked him to help, and now he's dead. This is Marco's fault, Emma said firmly. Not yours. Is there a difference anymore? Alessandro stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Every choice I make, people die. Every attempt to do the right thing makes things worse. Emma went to him, standing behind him, close but not touching. Rosa wanted me to tell you something. What? That she loves you. That she's proud of you. And that she wishes your father had lived to see the man you've become. Alessandro's shoulders shook once, and Emma realized he was crying silently, his reflection in the dark window showing tears on his cheeks. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. He turned in her embrace, and suddenly they were holding each other properly, his face buried in her hair, her arms tight around his waist. He was warm and solid and trembling, and Emma felt something break open in her chest, all the walls she'd built, all the careful distance she'd maintained. I don't know what to do, Alessandro whispered against her hair. I don't know how to win this. You don't have to know right now, Emma said. You just have to survive tonight. And tomorrow we'll figure out the next step. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet cottage while darkness fell completely outside. And Emma realized with terrifying clarity that somewhere between pulling a bullet from his side and listening to him talk about his grandmother's kitchen, she'd stopped seeing him as a dangerous stranger. She was starting to see him as hers to protect. And that changed everything. The days that followed Rosa's revelation took on a different quality. The comfortable distance Emma and Alessandro had maintained began to erode, replaced by something more intense, more complicated. They orbited closer now, their conversations deeper, their silences more charged with unspoken thoughts. Alessandro's wound healed steadily. By the end of the week, he could move without wincing, though Emma still insisted on checking and redressing the injury every morning. These medical sessions had become a kind of ritual, him sitting on the bathroom counter, her standing between his knees with antiseptic and fresh bandages, both of them hyper-aware of every accidental touch. You're a good healer, Emma observed one morning, gently probing the edges of the wound. The skin was knitting together cleanly, no signs of infection, just healthy pink scar tissue forming. Another week, and this will barely be visible. Good genetics, Alessandro said, his voice slightly rough. He was watching her face, not his injury, his gaze intense enough that Emma felt heat creep up her neck. Or good medical care, she countered, reaching for the gauze. His hand caught her wrist, stopping her. Emma. She looked up, meeting his eyes. They were so close like this, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker green in his irises, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his pupils dilated slightly when he looked at her. You've saved my life twice now, Alessandro said quietly. Once from the bullet, once from giving up. I didn't. You did. His thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist, probably feeling how fast her pulse was racing. That night you told me about Rosa's message, when I was ready to surrender, to turn myself in to Marco just to stop more people from dying. You didn't let me. You made me see there was still something worth fighting for. Your sister, Emma said. You have to stay alive for her. Not just Rosa. Alessandro's other hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses she'd noticed on his palms. I need to stay alive because I found something I didn't know I was looking for. Because somehow, impossibly, I found you. Emma's breath caught. She should step back, should maintain professional boundaries, should remember that this was temporary, that he was leaving soon, that getting involved with a man from his world was the definition of dangerous. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her own hand coming to rest on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, strong and slightly fast. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "I know. You're going to leave. This can't be anything permanent. I know that too." "Then why?" He kissed her. Or maybe she kissed him. Later, Emma wouldn't be able to say who moved first, only that suddenly his lips were on hers, soft and sure and tasting faintly of the coffee they'd shared at breakfast. Her hands slid up to his shoulders, careful of his healing side, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until she was pressed against him, bandages and medical supplies forgotten. It was a kiss that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. Emma's whole world narrowed to the warmth of his mouth, the gentle insistence of his hands on her back, the soft sound he made when she threaded her fingers through his hair. She'd been kissed before. Of course she'd been engaged, but nothing had felt like this. This desperate and gentle and inevitable all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me this is wrong, that we can't do this. Give me one good reason to walk away." Emma tried to think of one. Tried to remember all the logical, sensible reasons why this was a terrible idea. But all she could think about was how right it felt to be in his arms, how alive she felt for the first time in years, how even knowing this would end in heartbreak, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "I can't," she admitted. "I should, but I can't." Alessandro smiled against her lips. "Thank God," he whispered, and kissed her again. They spent that morning in a haze of stolen kisses and quiet touches, Emma abandoning her work, Alessandro forgetting his phone calls, both of them existing in a bubble where the dangerous world outside didn't matter. They talked between kisses, about everything and nothing. Alessandro told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the pressure of family expectations, about the moment he decided he wanted something different. "I was 14, he said, lying on the couch with Emma tucked against his good side, her head on his chest. "My father took me to a business meeting. I didn't understand then what kind of business it was. I just knew we were meeting with some men who seemed scared of my father." His fingers traced idle patterns on her arm as he spoke. "One of the men hadn't paid what he owed. My father asked me what I thought the appropriate punishment should be. I was 14, trying to impress him, so I suggested breaking the man's hand. My father laughed, said I was learning well. Then he did it himself, right there in front of me. Just grabbed the man's hand and broke his fingers, methodically, one by one." Emma felt him tense at the memory. The man was crying, begging, and my father was calm as anything. And I realized then that this was my future, hurting people, instilling fear, measuring success in pain inflicted. I went home and threw up. "But you still became what your father wanted," Emma said gently. "For a while. Because that's what you did in our family. You followed the path laid out for you. I told myself I could be different, more humane, less violent. But you can't be humane in an inhumane business. Eventually, you either become the monster or you leave." His arms tightened around her. "I chose to leave. Just took me longer than it should have." "What would you do?" Emma asked. "If you could do anything, be anyone, what would you choose?" Alessandro was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Then, I'd want to be someone who builds things instead of destroying them. Someone whose name means something good in the world. Someone who could." He paused, his hand stilling on her arm. "Someone who could deserve you." Emma lifted her head to look at him. "You already deserve to be happy, Alessandro. Whatever you've done, whoever you've been, you deserve a chance to be someone different." He cupped her face with both hands, his expression so tender it made her chest ache. "You see something in me I'm not sure is really there. I see who you are when you think no one's watching. When you talk about Rosa, or cook dinner, or laugh at my terrible jokes. I see the man you're trying to become, not just the one you were." She kissed him softly. "And I like what I see." "I'm falling for you," Alessandro said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a confession. "I know I shouldn't, I know it's too fast and too complicated and too dangerous, but I am. I'm falling in love with you, Emma Clarke, and I have no idea what to do about it." Emma's heart felt too big for her chest. She should be terrified by this declaration, should protect herself, should remember that this couldn't last. Instead, she felt joy, pure and uncomplicated and terrifying in its intensity. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted. "Have been since you made me pasta and told me about your grandmother. Maybe even before that." They kissed again, slow and sweet, and Emma let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the hope, the impossible longing for something that couldn't be hers to keep. Later, they moved to the kitchen, to the mundane task of preparing lunch, but everything felt different now. Every accidental touch sparked electricity. Every shared glance held promises and questions. Alessandro kept finding excuses to touch her, a hand on her waist as he reached past her for a spice, his fingers tangling with hers as they both reached for the same knife, standing behind her at the stove with his arms bracketing her body as he explained the proper way to sauté vegetables. "You're distracting me," Emma complained, but she was laughing, leaning back into him. "That's my plan," he murmured against her neck, placing a soft kiss there that made her shiver. They were in the middle of this gentle domestic scene when Alessandro's phone rang. Not the burner, his real phone, the one he'd retrieved from his destroyed car and that only a handful of people had the number to. His expression changed instantly, all the lightness draining away. "It's my lawyer," he said, moving away to answer. "Marco. What's wrong?" Emma couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Alessandro's face cycle through shock, anger, and finally, cold determination. "When?" he asked. "Then. How many?" A pause. "No, don't do anything. I'll handle it." Another pause. Longer this time. "Yes, I'm safe." "No, I can't tell you where. Just keep Rosa protected, whatever it takes." He hung up and stood very still for a moment, his back to Emma, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Alessandro." Emma approached carefully. "What happened?" When he turned, his expression was terrifying, not angry, but empty in a way that scared her more than rage would have. "Marco made his move. He's declared me dead to the family, held a funeral, taken full control of the organization." "But that's good, isn't it?" Emma tried. "If he thinks you're dead, he'll stop looking for you." "He doesn't think I'm dead. It's a power play, a way to force everyone's hand. He's declaring me a traitor and saying anyone who helps me is an enemy of the family." Alessandro's hands clenched into fists. "And he's started making examples. 3 more people dead, all people who supported my plans for legitimization." Emma felt sick. "Oh God. He's wiping out everyone loyal to me, eliminating any opposition, and consolidating power. By the time he's done, there will be no one left who can challenge him." Alessandro paced to the window, his reflection grim in the darkening glass. "Unless I stop him. What does that mean?" He turned back to her, and Emma saw the mafia boss in his eyes now, the dangerous man she'd momentarily forgotten he was. "It means I can't hide anymore. Can't keep running while people die for their loyalty to me." "You can't go back to Boston," Emma said, fear sharp in her voice. "Rosa said it was a death trap. They'll kill you the moment you show your face." "Probably," Alessandro agreed with terrifying calm. "But what's the alternative? Let Marco kill everyone I care about while I hide here like a coward?" "That's not hiding, that's surviving. There's a difference. You said that to me once before, remember?" Alessandro crossed back to her, taking her hands. "But maybe you were wrong. Maybe sometimes surviving isn't enough. Maybe sometimes you have to fight back, even if it costs you everything." "Don't." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Don't talk like you're already dead. Emma." "No. Listen to me." She gripped his hands harder, refusing to let go. "I understand you feel responsible for these people. I understand you want to protect them. But getting yourself killed won't save anyone. It'll just give Marco exactly what he wants." "Then what should I do?" Alessandro asked, and she heard the desperation underneath the steel in his voice. "Tell me, because I don't know anymore. I'm out of options, out of allies, running out of time. What would you have me do?" Emma looked at this complicated, dangerous, good man who'd crashed into her life and stolen her carefully guarded heart. She thought about the little girl in the hospital who died despite everyone's best efforts, about how she'd run from that pain rather than face it. She'd been surviving for 3 years now, safe and isolated and half alive. Alessandro had reminded her what it felt like to truly live, even if living meant risk and pain and the possibility of devastating loss. "Fight back," she heard herself say. "But smart. Use what you know about Marco against him. Gather the evidence you need to destroy him legally, not through violence. Take away his power without becoming him in the process." Alessandro stared at her. "That could take weeks. Months, even. Then take weeks. Take months." Emma moved closer, sliding her arms around his waist. "Stay here with me, while you plan it properly. Let me help you. I can't ask you to do that. To risk yourself like that. You're not asking. I'm offering." Emma looked up at him, seeing her own fear and determination reflected in his eyes. "I'm all in, Alessandro. For better or worse, I'm already involved. So let's do this the right way." He kissed her then, hard and desperate and grateful all at once. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," Emma agreed, making him laugh despite everything. "But you're stuck with me anyway." That night, they slept in Emma's bed together for the first time. Not making love, not yet, but holding each other close, finding comfort in proximity and shared warmth. Alessandro's arms around her felt like safety and danger all mixed together. Emma listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and wondered how she'd gotten here. 2 weeks ago, she'd been alone, safe, carefully controlled. Now she was harboring a mafia boss, planning to help him take down his murderous uncle, and falling helplessly in love despite all logic and self-preservation. It was the worst decision she'd ever made. It was also somehow the best. "I love you," Alessandro murmured into her hair, half asleep. "I know it's too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Emma Clarke." Emma's eyes filled with tears even as she smiled into the darkness. "I love you too," she whispered back. "God help me, but I do." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, sounding almost like a warning. But inside, warm and safe in each other's arms, they let themselves believe that love might be enough. At least for tonight.